Did you know that a small oversight on the home buying process can cost you thousands of dollars? Today, we're going to break down everything you need to know about real estate law and how to protect your biggest investment. In today's episode, we are going to dive deep inside buying your first home. We'll explore why having an attorney is crucial, understand the different state requirements, and break down the essential elements of your real estate contract. Joining us today, an experienced real estate attorney who's going to guide us through the complex but vital topics of real estate law. Welcome, everybody, to the First-Time Homebuyer Podcast. It's the first episode, and we're here to make real estate simple and accessible for everyone. I'm your host, Gerard Gibson, with the Gibson team at Coldwell Banker. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and notification icon so you don't miss any episodes, all right? Today, I'm thrilled to welcome my friend, my homie, Miss Lauren Scotton, everybody.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. This is very exciting. I feel like I'm on TV.
I know. Listen, I was trying to go for like the Shannon Sharp intro thing, but it's not working for me. So I'm going to have you.
It's the inaugural episode.
Right.
That's fine.
Right. We're going to be working out a lot of kinks today, but it's all good. So,
but you know what? Practice is what makes it work.
Definitely.
You know? So we're going to we'll learn.
Progression, not perfection.
That's right.
So before we dive in, I want to hear about your journey and what drew you to real estate law and what's your experience in the field?
Sure. So I went to law school sort of already knowing I didn't want to go into a field of law that was going to be very adversarial all the time. I knew I wasn't going to be the type of lawyer who you see on TV, on Law and Order or Suits, that just, it's not my personality. It was not what I had any interest in doing. And so in law school, there was something about real estate law that just sort of clicks in my mind and made a lot of sense. And at the end of the day, real estate is sort of a cooperative enterprise, because you have a seller who wants to sell a home, you have a buyer who wants to buy that home. And even though they each have different prerogatives in that journey, the goal is to get the title transferred. And so it's sort of a more, like I said, cooperative enterprise than a different field of law, which tends to be a little bit more adversarial all the time, every day.
Right. There's a lot of moving parts in a real estate transaction. You got the buyer's agent, the listing agent, and then you got the listing attorney, the buyer's attorney, and then you got paralegals, and then you got transaction coordinators. It's a lot of people involved, and everybody kind of has to do their job in order for this thing to work, right? So with all that being said, what do you feel is the most rewarding part for helping first-time home buyers or helping your clients?
Well, and that's the great part of real estate law, is that you're working with folks all of the time who maybe it's the first time they're buying a home, maybe they're selling a home that they've lived in for a long time. They're milestone moments for people. And, you know, it's sort of a heartwarming to be involved in those moments with people. You know, it's especially great. You know, every time you have a deal that's smooth, it feels good. You have a seller who sells, you have a buyer who buys, they're so excited, and it feels great. And then every once in a while, we'll have deals where the buyer and seller will come to know each other somehow, and they just, not only is it a good deal for both of them, but then they start to like each other. Right. And so now everybody's like super in sync, and it's like extra smooth. And those are always great, because now you really feel like everybody is super jazzed about this deal. And those are the transactions that they feel so good on the, you know, to me as the lawyer, that you hope the next deal is going to be just as good. And so it sort of creates a feedback loop.
Right. I approach every deal like that. I hope
it's going to be terrific. Right. It's going to be an 11.
And sometimes it doesn't. You know, sometimes it doesn't. And, you know, one of the reasons why I like working with you is because even if it doesn't, we're going to figure out a way. We're gonna figure out a way to make it work. So,
Yep.
you're
The train
definitely
has to stay on the tracks. Like,
yes,
we are
ma'am.
going to keep the train on the tracks. The only way the train is coming off the tracks is if like a missile hits the train. We're doing this. It is happening.
For sure. So, I watch a lot of YouTube. I watch a lot of social media, and there's always a lot of gurus and experts and coaches and people that make suggestions or give tips and trips about buying a home and the process and da 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 da. I noticed that a lot of people say, hey, you need a title company, but here in Connecticut we don't have title companies, quote unquote. We have attorneys. What's the
Yeah.
difference?
That's such a great point. So we do real estate transactions differently in every state in this country. Most states have title or escrow companies that manage real estate transactions. Connecticut is one of a handful of states where real estate transactions are handled by lawyers. So to become a lawyer in the state of Connecticut, you have to go to law school, you have to get a law degree, you have to sit, pass a bar exam, and then you are admitted to the bar. And under Connecticut law, which actually requires real estate transactions to be conducted by lawyers, then you can handle a real estate transaction. In other states where the transaction is not necessarily being handled by a lawyer, those states may have different state licensing requirements for the companies that handle real estate, but they're not necessarily going to be a lawyer.
Right. Oh, so you don't even have a title company. Technically, it doesn't need a lawyer.
Yeah. So the title and the escrow companies in other places may or may not, because I don't work in an escrow state. I can't sort of flesh out the fine points of it. But they would have licensing requirements for escrow agents, but the escrow agent doesn't necessarily have to be a lawyer. In Connecticut, if you're going to do a real estate transaction, you have to be a lawyer under state law.
Right. Okay. So I always wanted to get that cleared up. Sometimes I get people calling from, out of state, or they could be in Connecticut and they just kind of say the wrong thing. I'm like, yeah, no, we don't do that.
So we do have title companies in the state of Connecticut. They just serve a little bit of a different purpose.
Right.
In Connecticut, the title companies help us get title searches, excuse me, and then they also provide title insurance, which is something the buyer's attorney does with the title insurance company. But the actual transaction, the consumer doesn't really talk directly to their title company. The consumer is going to deal with their attorney, and their attorney is going to deal on the back end with the title insurance company.
Gotcha. Okay. So what are some of the most common legal issues you see, that first-time home buyers will face?
I think the most important thing for buyers to know and sort of appreciate is that when they make an offer on a home, if the seller accepts the offer and signs it, that is your contract. And so we use a lot of contracts in Connecticut. Many of them do not have any sort of attorney review. So once you've signed, that's your deal. So if, as a consumer, as a buyer, if you're not comfortable with those terms, it is helpful to have a conversation with your lawyer before you sign. There's no sort of, I sign and I can change my mind within 24 hours or 3 days and cancel it. Once it's signed, that's your binding agreement. Most buyers and their agents will have a form they're going to make their offer on. So as a buyer, you can have a conversation with your agent, what contract are you going to use to make my offer? And then that buyer can have a conversation with their attorney about the terms of that contract form, so that a buyer, at least going into an offer, has a confidence level that they know what the terms of this offer mean. So if it gets signed, they already know what, all the material terms of their agreement are.
Right. And so based off of that, how can buyers protect themselves from, the negative side of that, you know what I mean? Or, breaching contracts and things like that. Don't breach the contract, obviously, but.
So in Connecticut, most real estate attorneys do not bill hourly. Okay. So as a buyer, it is in your best interest to hook up with a lawyer very early on, before you even go searching for homes, because it's not going to cost you more to talk to your lawyer 2 months out or 3 months out than if you wait until 2 weeks out or 3 weeks out, because it's the same flat fee. Right. So sort of the first step in protecting yourself is sort of developing this team early on as a buyer. You have your real estate agent, you have your real estate attorney, you have your finance person, and they're going to help guide you through this transaction. So don't be afraid of engaging a lawyer up front. Like I said, this is not like Law and Order. You typically are not going to pay a retainer to hire your real estate attorney. You don't really, in our firm, you don't pay me anything up front. You agree that I'm going to be your lawyer and you pay me at closing. So by getting your lawyer involved early on, if it's Gerard, one of your clients, they can call me and say, I know we're going to make an offer. We're going to use the New Haven board contract. And I can walk through that contract with that buyer paragraph by paragraph. So if they want to make an offer at 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning, when I'm usually cleaning my house, they already go into that offer process knowing what their contract says. And now they're just deciding, how much do I want to offer to pay for the house? Right. And it sort of gives them that confidence level that they know what their agreement says.
Definitely. So I'm going to put your contact information on the screen, by the way. You can connect with Lauren Scotton at what's the name of your law firm?
The law firm is Bailey and Hirschman. We're in our main office where I work is in Cheshire, Connecticut. We also have offices down in Fairfield County and in Bronxville, New York.
Okay. I put her information in the chat. Her telephone number is there, and also her email on YouTube, so you can connect. So I did that because you brought a good point of connecting with your attorney before you actually get under contract. Now, I've learned a lot of my skill set from hanging out with you. You know what I mean? So I for the most part, I'm confident up until that point, but I do, reach out to you sometimes. Like if I'm in the gym, the one we just talked about in Hamden with the setbacks or whatever. Listen, I'm working on this deal. I got an issue, and you definitely guided me through and saved us from a headache. So I definitely appreciate that. And yes, she is readily available. So let's talk about contracts real quick. What are the key elements to a contract that a first-time home buyer needs to understand?
Sure. So the basis of this is, as a buyer, you are going to exchange money, like a lot of money, for title to a piece of land that has a house on it. And that is sort of broken down in your contract. How much are you going to pay? Of that purchase price, how much of that money is your money and how much you're going to borrow? Are there any contingencies or conditions that have to happen before, as a buyer, you are required to proceed with the purchase of this home? What happens to the house while it's under contract? Who's responsible for it? And then what happens when one of the sides doesn't uphold their obligations under their contract? So breach of contract remedies. And then, of course, the time frame for when all of this is going to happen. So your contract lays all of this out as sort of a roadmap. What are we buying? How much are we buying for? How are we going to accomplish that? So in other words, is it cash? Is it financed? Taking care of the house? Who's responsible for taking care of the house? And then what happens if you don't uphold your promises?
Right. Okay. And so you mentioned contingencies. So explain a little deeper what are contingencies and why they're important.
Sure. So if you're a buyer and you sign a contract to buy a house for $400,000, and at the time you sign that contract and the seller accepts it, you now have to buy a house for $400,000. If you don't have $400,000, that's a bit of a pickle. So your contract is going to provide an out or an exit ramp for you to get a mortgage. So if you know you're going to buy this house for $400,000, but you have to borrow $320,000 under a mortgage, The mortgage contingency part of the contract will give you a period of time to try to secure that loan. And if you can't get a loan during that period, you can then go to the seller and say, I was unable to meet this condition on my performance. I was unable to secure a loan, so I cannot proceed with this transaction. And if you make that, give that notice under that contingency period, as a buyer, you can get out of the deal and it's not considered a breach of contract. I think about contingencies as like off ramps on the highway. So when you sign your deal, you get on the highway, the only way you're getting off the highway, the only way you're getting out of this deal with your deposit is if you're getting off on an off ramp. And the two that we see most frequently are mortgage contingency and inspection contingency. And if you're on your highway and you don't get a loan and you see your mortgage contingency ramp is coming, you get off on the mortgage contingency ramp with your deposit. So you haven't breached your contract. However, there are dates. Like I said, the contract tells us the time frame for when all of this has to happen. So if you are on the highway and you've now passed that mortgage contingency ramp, it's too late to get off the contract, get off the highway there. You can't just throw it in reverse on 91 and back up and get off exit 25. That's just not how it works. So you have to just be mindful when your offer is made and you have these contingencies, which I strongly recommend, that the dates that you're using are going to be feasible, because you don't want to have a date that's too soon and it doesn't actually give you enough time to do an inspection or do the financing piece of it.
Right. And what if you need more time?
So our contracts, with the exception of one contract in the state of Connecticut that I can think of, most of them don't contemplate any extension. Now, in practice, we as a buyer's attorney, if you need more time on a mortgage, I would go to the seller's attorney and ask them to extend that mortgage contingency date. And if they say yes, then we have a new contingency date. There's at least one contract that I can think of in that scenario where the seller could then cancel the deal. If you don't have your contingency, your commitment, your loan commitment on a mortgage contingency, they would have the option of terminating the contract. Otherwise,
so meaning you can ask for more time, but they don't necessarily have to agree to it, right?
Right. So they don't have to agree to it. As a buyer, you would normally have the option of proceeding anyway. So your mortgage contingency is March 22nd. You don't have a loan commitment. You ask the seller to give you another week. If the seller says no, you can cancel your transaction and get your deposit back. Or as a buyer, you can continue. If you're pretty confident that you're going to get the loan, you just need it until Tuesday, you can continue. But because now you've passed that March 22nd off-ramp date, if it turns out that the loan does not materialize, you now would be breaching the contract if you can't perform.
Right. Most
often, if you're starting with reasonable dates, and we have to ask for an extension, usually, especially if it's a first extension, it's usually not the end of the world.
Right.
Now, there's all sorts of asterisks. The lawyer in me is every piece of legal advice is fact specific. So if you're on your 17th extension, maybe they're going to say no this time. It's not always guaranteed, but everybody has a certain interest in moving the deal forward. So if it's a small extension request, it probably makes more sense for the seller to grant it than to deny it.
So just a quick so we're talking about contingencies right now. The contingencies are different parts as a part of the contract. So you'll usually have 2 or 3 contingencies. So you got your inspection, mortgage.
Yep.
And that's it.
Those are the two. Yeah, those are the two we see most frequently. Contingencies are typically seen on the buyer side, and they're things that protect the buyer. So again, it's a condition. It's something that has to happen before the buyer's required to actually buy the house. Now, the more contingencies you put in a contract, the more you can protect a buyer. And so we can have a contingency that says the house must appraise, and you can have all sorts of additional protections. But there's a balance, especially right now, because there are more buyers than there are available homes. So I can write a contract that is very, very protective of a buyer, but it's not going to get accepted by a seller.
Right.
And so we strike a balance between wanting to protect buyers, but also wanting that buyer's offer to be considered. Because if I'm a seller and I've got Gerard's client coming in saying, I'm going to do a mortgage contingency and an inspection contingency, and I have another agent whose client is making an offer that also has several other contingencies, I'm probably going to choose the offer from your client, because as a seller, there are fewer ways that buyer can get out of that deal. There are fewer conditions on the buyer's performance if it's just the two contingencies and not a different deal with more contingencies.
Right. The more contingency in the seller's eyes, the more contingencies, the more ways it is for the buyer to back out of the deal when ultimately the seller just wants to close.
Yeah.
As soon as possible. So deposits and inspections. What should buyers do? First of all, what is an earnest money deposit?
Sure. So part of the contract process is putting up some money as a buyer. You put up some money to show that you're in it, you've got skin in the game, you mean it. Otherwise, as a buyer, you could go and make offers on 17 houses. And if you don't have to put up any money, there's nothing that really stops you from doing that. And so by having a deposit, it's money that you put up, and it's typically held either by the seller's attorney or the seller's brokerage. It doesn't go directly to the seller. It's held on the sale side. And if you default, if you breach the contract, that money is forfeited. If you don't breach, if you get to the closing, then the deposit is applied to your purchase price. So it just gets credited towards the overall amount that you owed for the house.
Right. And as far as deposits, what's the rule of thumb? So hold on, let me get my words right. When I took real estate class, they said it could be anywhere from $1 or consideration. Is there a specific amount that has to be deposited, is what I was trying to say?
There isn't any specific amount. Now, in Fairfield County, the custom is 10%. And we do our contracts in Fairfield a little bit different than we do them in the rest of the state of Connecticut. And so there's a two-step process in Fairfield where the buyer makes an offer to purchase and would tender 1% of the deposit with the offer. The attorneys then prepare a superseding contract. And when that is signed, the buyer is expected to tender the other 9% of that deposit. Outside Fairfield County, there is no hard and fast rule for how much the deposit can be. I've seen situations where maybe the buyer is buying a property from their landlord, and so the deposit's pretty minimal because these are parties that know each other and are already acting in good faith. I've seen scenarios where the deposit is 25% of the price, because the buyer is going to buy this house no matter what, and they want to come in real hot and strong that, look at all this money I'm willing to risk. Look how serious I am about buying this home, that I will risk $100,000 or $250,000 as the deposit on this house.
So, and even like you said, Fairfield County customarily is 10%, right? But I'm just putting this out there. So what if I have 3% conventional? What if I'm coming in with a 3% conventional? Are they still expected to put 10%?
I mean, there's no hard. It's not the law.
Gotcha.
If you're coming in with an offer with less than 10% on deposit, you may get a question from the listing agent about why it's less. Right. But it's not an automatic discount. Like your offer is definitely off the table right off the bat, because again, every deal has its own unique sort of features and particularities. So there may be some other aspect of your offer that's very attractive to a seller and makes it worth it to the seller to take a smaller deposit than what would customarily be tendered.
Yeah. Gotcha. So, all right. So after a buyer finds the house that they want to put an offer in, they get an offer accepted. So executed contract, right? Seller signs a contract. Everybody's in agreement. The first step would be the deposit, right?
Yep.
Deliver the deposit. And if there's an inspection contingency, the second step would be to have the inspection.
Yes.
What is the inspection process from like a legal perspective?
Sure.
Like, yeah.
So when you sign the contract to buy this home, you are buying it in its present condition. So contracts for, buying homes are all, you're buying the house in its as is, where is.
Mm-hmm.
The only properties in Connecticut that come sort of with a warranty automatically are new construction homes. So if you're buying an existing home, you are getting it in the condition it's in right now when you sign that contract. So a home inspection gives you an opportunity to get a better idea of the actual condition of this house. Because there's a lot of things, especially if you have a property that's served by a well and a septic, that you can't see just walking through. And so having a home inspection gives you as the buyer a really comprehensive report about the actual condition of this property. And if it's bad, typically the contract gives you as the buyer an off-ramp. It's that contingency where you could get out of the deal. It's not breach of contract. Your deposit is returned. You're still out the money for your home inspection. But even if you pay $1,200 for a home inspection and the home inspection tells you it needs a well and a new septic, I mean, you could be at $70,000 right there.
Mm-hmm.
If you bought that house not knowing that.
Right.
So it's certainly worth the money you're going to front to pay an inspector to understand the condition of the house. At closing, if the property condition has changed, that's something that we raise with the seller. Otherwise, if there is a condition at that house that you did not notice as part of the home inspection, you can't raise it later. So it's very, very important that you take that opportunity during the inspection to do a very full, very thorough inspection, because that's your one bite at the apple. After that, if you just discover it because now at the walkthrough the house is empty and you notice that, hey, this piece of molding is damaged, if you hadn't raised it earlier, you're not going to be able to raise it now.
Right. I had I wrote an offer on a property a couple weeks ago. There was an inspection contingency. It was as is inspection for buyer knowledge only. The seller comes back and says, "Nah, we really want you to waive inspections because we know that you can still ask for repairs because you have the contingency." Is that true? Even though in the contract we had as is?
Yeah, and so this is Gerard, you and I work together a lot, and I work with a lot of agents at your company. And so this is one of those things when I do classes for agents where my eyes cross and my blood pressure goes up and you can see the steam coming out of my ears. So agents will sometimes use language that says the inspection is for informational purposes only. Mm-hmm. The idea being that if you are a buyer, you're going to do a home inspection, but you're preserving your right to cancel. So if you do the inspection and it's terrible, you're preserving your right to cancel the deal and get out with your deposit. But you are not going to ask the seller to fix things or to give you credits or price concessions in lieu of fixing things. So in other words, just let me get in. The inspection is necessary because you need the seller's permission to actually come onto their property with a stranger and inspect their home. Right. So you want to come in, you want to do that inspection, but listen, I'm not going to ask you for anything. I have never, in the almost 13 years I've been doing this, seen that stop a buyer from asking anyway. And it drives me bonkers. Now, the other thing that drives me bonkers is saying that you're going to do an inspection for informational purposes only. And this is really, my bone to pick with real estate agents, is unnecessary and potentially harmful, because we have seen scenarios where a seller has said, well, you said you're just doing this for your own information. And so now you have the information, but you don't have the right to cancel. Right. And so that's why my caution, particularly to the real estate agents, is don't even use that verbiage. There's language that we can put in the contract that says the buyer's going to buy it as is. They preserve the right to do an inspection. They preserve their right to cancel if they're not happy with the inspection, but they're not going to ask the seller for credits or repairs. Even with that verbiage, buyers will still ask for things.
Still
Sellers don't have to agree. They will always ask. I literally, in thousands of deals, I've never seen it stop anybody.
For sure. And I asked that. I knew he was right. And that's probably what I was gonna do. I'm not lying, but
and my one question for first-time home buyers is, right now, because there are more buyers than there are homes, one of the ways people try to make their offers more attractive is by peeling back those contingencies.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, especially if it's a property with a well or a septic, you don't want to buy a home with no home inspection and then find out after you've closed that there's some major problem, because there's no going back to the seller and saying, well, hey, you didn't tell me that your septic was failing. It's just the process of trying to hold the seller responsible for a property condition after you've closed is limited to maybe being able to prove that the seller commit fraud. And that's a very high bar. And it means you're probably going to have to hire a litigator. And so you're going to front a bunch of money to retain a litigator, and you may or may not win. And in the meantime, you still got to fix your failing septic. So I would be very cautious about proceeding with a contract to buy a home without a home inspection. There's also a lot of flips. So homes that somebody buys and renovates. And so when you walk in, they're pristine. They're all millennial gray. They look great. Just because it's been renovated, I would not forego a home inspection.
Right. Definitely. So in closing, what's some words of encouragement or some positive words to first-time home buyers that are taking this leap of faith, getting out here and actually purchasing a home?
Yeah, it is stressful. And especially when you start the process and you have an offer that gets accepted, it moves very quickly. And so that can sort of add a little bit to the stressful feelings. If you start by having a real estate agent that you trust, you have your real estate attorney, you have your finance person. Even if this is the first time that you've bought a home, it is not the first time that we have helped somebody buy a home. And so if you set up a team, you don't have to know all the answers. You don't have to, even know what questions to ask, because we've done it so many times that we will literally shepherd you through the whole process. Right. So my number one piece of advice would be to start with a team. Get all of those players lined up. Ultimately, you're the coach. As the buyer, you're driving the bus. You are making I don't know the sports analogies. You're making the calls. You're calling the plays, whatever. Right. But if you have good players, they're going to help you through. And so even though it's a little bit scary and it can be stressful, if you have that team around you, it's going to help mitigate some of that.
For sure. So listen, I've been in this for 11 years now. And I like to say I have curated a team.
I like that.
I have curated a team of good real estate professionals. One thing I like about Lauren and Bailey and Hirschman is the only thing they do is real estate law. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lauren, any attorney can do a real estate transaction, correct?
Right. So in Connecticut, you just have to be a lawyer to do a real estate transaction. Connecticut, though, has some rules on lawyers. And as a lawyer, you can't say you specialize in a field unless the state offers a specialization exam. And residential real estate is one of the few places where the state actually offers an exam for that. There are 14 of us in the state of Connecticut, myself included, board certified residential real estate specialists. So in addition to becoming a lawyer, I then sat for another day-long exam to become board certified as a specialist in this field. 100% of my practice is residential real estate. I don't even do commercial. I am 100% residential real estate. The firm just does real estate. So there are attorneys here who do commercial. I, though, personally just do residential.
Gotcha. 14 in the state,
There's
though?
14 of us in the state of Connecticut that have taken and passed that exam to be board certified specialists in this field. Yeah.
Who is your attorney? You know what I mean? But
Yep.
so here, let me put your contact information up again. I posted in the comments on YouTube. Hopefully, it's on Facebook as well. You can reach Lauren Scotton at baileyandhirschman.com/Lauren Scotton Esquire, right? Or
ESQ. Yeah.
ESQ. Yep. And her telephone number, you can reach out to her 203-718-6218.
Yep.
And
Right to me.
And it'll get right to her and put her on your team. You need her on your team. If you want to book a 30-minute consultation with me, I will shout out my man GP. I see you. Thanks for hanging out with us, GP. If you want to book a 30-minute consultation with me, you can go to my website, gerardgibson.com, click the link, book online, and fill out the form, select the date and time, and we can chop it up. I can introduce you to the people that are on my team, like Lauren Scotton. And also next week, next Saturday, I'm having on the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Lloyd Brownfield, one of my go-to lenders. Nobody's ever met Lloyd. You know that? Like he's like the Dos Equis guy. He's everywhere. Nobody's ever said, I want to go to his office. Like, yeah, nah, he's in Florida right now. He wrote me a pre-approval in a swimming pool in Mexico one time. This guy's all over the place. But we get it done. So I've curated my team. My team is strong. My team is solid. And we're here to help you guys out through your real estate journey. So book that call Lauren, hit the subscribe button, the bell notifications, so you don't miss another episode. Also, real quick, join the Home Buyers Hub is my free Facebook group for not just listen. It's called the First-Time Homebuyer Podcast, but this is just geared towards real estate for anybody that needs to go through a transaction. And even if you own a home and you're looking to purchase a second home, there's a process with that as well. So the First-Time Home Buyers Hub, we're going to be flooding that Facebook group with tons of content, tons of information. I'll probably do some live streams specifically there, throughout the week. But we're still going to have the First-Time Home Buyers Podcast every Saturday morning right here on YouTube. And I did stream on Facebook this morning too, but YouTube's definitely going to be the home base for this podcast. Lauren, I thank you for getting up early Saturday morning. I think I saved you from cleaning the house on Saturday.
You did. You saved me from doing my house cleaning. So you got it. It's worth it.
No, definitely. Thanks for hanging out with me. And we'll catch you guys again next week. Have a good one. Now I got to end this thing.